right. Great. Well, welcome everybody. It's so wonderful to see so many folks here today who are interested in this topic. This is something that I've been super interested in for a really long time. By way of introductions, my name is Holly Condie. I am the Advocacy Director for Gem State and come to this work, oh gosh, about 15 years or so working in community building, about 10 years working in policy, including housing policy, but also open space preservation policy. I am an educator turned advocate. So usually, got my start in the classroom, have taught grade school all the way up to graduate school. So that's the kind of my approach to everything I do is that teacher mindset. Um, Quick roadmap for everyone. Oop. Drop your name and location into the chat. That's super helpful for us. So we've got a good idea of where folks are coming from. And then get your notebook, start a new document, however it is that you like to learn, take notes, etc. Some of this is going to be somewhat interactive. And so I'd like ideally for you all to get started on this work, right? What we're going to do today is give you the basic steps to organize a housing group, a pro housing group. So jot down your questions as we go. There will be 3 sections, but we're going to stop at the end of each section and take questions and kind of think through the work of making a pro housing group. So first off, why organizing? I mentioned this a little bit, but we want to be able to counter that NIMBY narrative, right? I've heard time and time again from elected officials that when these projects are put in front of them, a development comes up in front of them, they only hear the negative, right? The folks who show up are saying, no, we don't want this. It'll change things. We hate it. We don't want this. What we really want to do is build a supportive, positive group in whatever city or town you're in who can support these projects, who can support more housing at reasonable prices, right? Also, why organize? Because we want to affect policy change. So it's not only individual projects, it is code rewrites, right? Or policy changes, or even if it's at the state level. And then thirdly, deepening roots in your community, right? When you organize a group like this, it is such a golden opportunity to meet your neighbors, right? Work with folks in a way that you maybe haven't before. Get to know people around your community, and really just get a little bit more rooted in your town or city. So that's why we're organizing. There are 3 steps, right? So the first one is recruiting potential people to your housing group, your pro housing group, leaders, advocates, and people who can just take action, right? Second part, we're going to talk about building structure and building that community and giving it some a roadmap and goals, and so it's a little bit more productive and it's not just yay housing and we're going to do all of these things. It needs to have a little bit of structure. And then thirdly, taking action. How do you actually use your group to affect policy change? So those are our 3 steps. First one, recruiting potential leaders and advocates. So again, this is you in the middle. I'm approaching this like you are all interested in starting some sort of pro housing group. And this is the basic steps. Some things to think through also maybe back in this phase. The timeline on this can change depending on what your goals are. The size of your group can change depending on what your goals are, right? Are you forming a pro housing group because you want to support a comprehensive plan update and it's going to be really complex? You're going to need a bigger group, right? If you've got one development in mind that you want to support, maybe that's a smaller group of neighbors. So these things are scalable from really big, robust, complex, incorporated nonprofit organizations to like neighborhood coffee groups. They're all effective and they're all organizing. Recruiting potential leaders and advocates. This is where we got to start. We got to start by finding the people. Research is the best place to begin, right? You need to understand the local landscape first before you really get into actually doing the work. So inventory existing groups that are already doing this work or working in an adjacent field, right? So nonprofits are a great place to start, right? If you've got a nonprofit that works to prevent homelessness, or church group that helps folks, housing trusts, chambers of commerce, and business groups are usually pretty interested in housing because they want to have housing for their workforce, right? Who's already doing this work? University groups, obviously, our younger people are struggling to be able to afford to live in Idaho still. And so a lot of times you'll have student groups who understand that this is a problem, but don't necessarily know how to take action, right? So you want to be able to loop those folks in if you've got a university in your city. Community organizations, and that can be, unofficial groups, just kind of loose groups, Facebook pages sometimes. But do that inventory, make a note of who's already doing this work and who might be a potential ally. In that list, you could also write down who's a potential opponent, right? Is there already an organization who's out there fighting every single development or fighting housing, that kind of thing? Just make a note of what's already in your community. What local policies exist that are preventing more homes from being built, right? Maybe your city doesn't allow ADUs, or they have a really large minimum lot size that's preventing smaller homes from being built. Take note of that, write that down, because that could be one of your very specific goals in policy change, right? We want a smaller minimum lot size so that we can afford to build smaller homes. Is there a particular location or neighborhood that has potential, right? You know your city best, you know your town. What areas could really benefit from this, right? Maybe it's a neighborhood that's really close to a big jobs center or a big employer, and they really need something that's affordable for their people. Or it's more of a low income neighborhood, or whatever the place may be. Look through kind of your mental inventory and make that into or add it onto your spreadsheet, add it onto your list. Your next step, once you've kind of listed out everybody, connect with those groups, right? Because the worst thing we can do is have all of these different groups that are interested in solving the same problem and they're working in silos, right? So you got to make sure that you're talking with each other. Connect with those groups either one-on-one or present at a meeting, right? Your Rotary clubs, your Kiwanis clubs, those kinds of places are great because they're people who are already connected into their community, and you can show up, talk with them, make connections, and present with them. Or it's a one-on-one coffee or beer situation too. Show up at community events, farmers markets, block parties, 4th of July celebrations. All of these things are on the horizon, and they're a great place to just start having conversations about housing and affordability in your community. And sometimes if you're really organized, you can set up a table. You can actually solicit people. Hey, come here, talk with me. What's your housing story? Gather those stories and make connections in your community. Invite friends to talk, listen to their housing stories, gather housing stories. Everybody's got one, right? Everybody's got a friend or a relative who can't afford to live in Idaho anymore. Talk to your neighbors, the pickup line, the dog park, the folks across the street, at the mailboxes, wherever it is. Have conversations with folks and be willing to listen to what is their perspective about housing. What are they seeing as the needs in the community? Okay. Creating your contact list. I love a spreadsheet, but I know not everyone does. But the best way to track all of this is tracking all of it. Make a spreadsheet with all of your contacts, right? You've got your list of groups, you've got maybe a list of individuals. Keep track of them. What neighborhood are they in? Or, where do they represent? Where are they met? Where did you meet this person? And what is their interest level? And when I say interest level, right, you might have somebody who you have a conversation with them about housing and they are gung ho, they want to make policy change. They know what needs to be changed. They are ready to take action. They're going to have an interest level 1, right? You might have a different conversation with somebody who totally understands that there's a problem and wants to see change, but maybe, has limited time or capacity. They don't necessarily feel super comfortable showing up at a meeting. There may be a 4 or a 5, right? They might be able to send a letter, send an email, something like that, but they're not going to be the core part of your organizing group. And then notes, right? Like just general notes. This person is super excited about XYZ policy. And then track their actions too, right? This person helped with testimony, or this person, built our Facebook page, that kind of thing. It's all helpful, but you've got to track it. Okay, this is where I want to stop and take a minute to think through kind of what we've covered so far. And these are just potential questions, right? You don't have to like go through and answer all of these. This is not a test. You don't have to answer everything specifically, but take a minute to really think through who might be interested, what groups exist already in my city or in my town that might be interested in housing, right? And I will put the clock on. If you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask. I'm going to take a look at the chat, and I've got my nifty timer on right now. So feel free to unmute too. CCNRs are getting in the way for infill projects. Absolutely, they are. That's a big policy change, but something that you could absolutely do. We want to be able to organize around that to change some CCNRs. And that, I'm thinking within Nils's comment for within homeowners associations. Local real estate associations, realtors are awesome on housing issues, can be super, super helpful. Home builders associations, also super, super helpful. What other questions do we have about inventory of people and relationships? Ooh, we got Lauren all the way up from Utah. Welcome, Lauren. Boise neighborhood associations have a big seat at the table. Absolutely. That is very true. And that might be different city to city. So neighborhood associations are a lot of times in that gray area. They're sort of part of the city, but they're maybe their own nonprofit, sometimes not, just kind of depending. And they often have a really outsized voice in whether or not a project goes forward. Kathy asked, what are CCNRs? Covenants and restrictions. Covenants, something in restrictions, but basically saying what can and cannot be built, right? So if you live in an HOA and your HOA has CCNRs that say you cannot have pink houses, you can't build a pink house, right? Or paint your house pink, or the legislature can override specific elements of the CCNR. That's a very specific question. So maybe that one might be better offline. Yeah. Cool. So let's move on. Valley County lack of infrastructure. Yes. Yep. Elaine brings up a really good point about Valley County lack of infrastructure. Cool. So let's move on to the next part, building that community, giving it some structure, right? How are we we've got kind of an inventory of who might be helpful in this effort. How are we going to give it structure and make it go, give it wheels? So you've got to have kind of a core planning group, right? Sometimes it's as small as 4 or 5 people. Any bigger than that, and it starts to get unwieldy. But start with your core group of people who are your pro-housing supporters. They want to get involved. They want to show up. They want to affect change. A lot of times, sometimes these groups will form really quickly, right? And again, that goes back to our scale. Sometimes if you've got a project, they're taking public comment in 6 weeks. You've got a form, you make the thing, you do the thing, you inventory, and you give it legs, and it goes quickly. Other times, like for a full comp plan update, that process can take 2 years. And so some groups will be really thoughtful about how they structure and how they organize. It just kind of depends on what your end goal is, right? Find a space and invite the people, right? Get that core group of people and try and meet in person. Make it regular, if possible. Personal emails, calls, texts, that kind of thing. Give notice if possible. We're all super busy people, so try and make sure that it's on somebody's calendar so that they can come. Uh, a lot of folks don't realize, but most organizing happens around somebody's kitchen table, right? This does not have to be fancy. It does not have to be this, reserved room where you do a very formal workshop. A lot of organizing happens in people's homes, right? It's people getting together with their neighbors, having conversations, and talking through some of the problems and the solutions over a cup of coffee. Uh, begin, but crafting an interactive agenda. So make sure that when you are working with that core group of people, everybody knows what the agenda is. Everybody's got an idea of what the goals are and what we're all doing together. And begin building those relationships, right? Back to your spreadsheet, you could add a column that's individual stories because stories are super powerful. And so if we go back to Eloise's story, she's our senior who can't downsize. That's her story. Ask her to tell that for you. But storytelling is a big part of it. Make it fun, with your planning group, or if you've got a bigger group outside your core planning group, hands-on engagement. Ask people to draft out, on a whiteboard what it is that they would like to see in their neighborhood, right? Do they want to see, different shapes and sizes of housing? Do they want to see more open space or parks? Do they want more access to restaurants or grocery stores or, whatever it is? Get people involved in using their imagination and trying to think through all of this. Try to facilitate inclusively, right? Make sure that when folks are showing up to your planning meeting or your group meeting, that they get to actually tell their story, and that everybody feels heard, right? If you've just got one or two people that dominate the conversation, then you're going to get just a dominated narrative, and that's not helpful. Bill says in the chat, representation across multiple sectors definitely matters. You want a broad group of people. You want people from different ages, different backgrounds, typically different incomes, if that's possible, to be part of your group. Leave space for personal check-ins at the start of every meeting. That's important too. Building identity and online presence. So again, this is with that core group of people. You're going to want to use some of these early get-togethers to figure out who you are, right? You've got this shared identity. You're all pro-housing people. What does that mean? What's your visibility look like? How do you show up in the community, right? Just take some time with that core group of people, that 4 or 5 people who are your leaders in your pro-housing group. What are your goals? We want to, impact the comprehensive plan update. Cool. That's a very big goal. You can break that down into sub goals, or it can be something a little smaller, right? We want to see the development on Lake Street go forward, right? And define those goals, come up with your mission. What's your message, right? Like, we want more housing at affordable rates. That's your message. Cool. Brainstorm ideas for a group name. Simple names tend to be better because they're easier to remember. If you've got somebody who's super creative and can come up with something catchy, excellent. That's awesome. If you've got 10 letters in an acronym, maybe pare it down a little bit. And then determine whether or not you're going to need any tech or software to organize, right? If your goal is big, like you want to impact a whole comp plan update, you're going to need a website, right? You're going to need to reach people beyond that core group of 4 or 5 planners that you've got around your living room table or around your coffee table. you're going to want more structure and regular communications and that kind of thing. So maybe you've got a website that's going to cost, maybe $20 or something like that to live for the life of this project. It can be pretty inexpensive if you've got somebody who can do it for you. So again, do you need a budget? What is your budget? How are you going to fundraise for that? Some of these efforts can be put together without a whole lot of expense, right? If you've got, especially if you're trying to support, just maybe one development or one home building project, that might not be very robust, right? You can get a free Gmail account to kind of loop everyone together, that kind of thing. You can use a survey to collect information for supporters. So there are tools out there. You don't have to have a huge budget to organize. Set up your social media, create accounts on platforms where people are active in your community. And that can be a variety of places, right? And we know that different generations tend to favor different social media channels, right? So the boomers in the room and maybe the elder millennials, we might use Facebook more often, but you definitely want to get the youths, the younger people who are on TikTok. You want to get both audiences, right? Because housing affects all of us, and to do really good engagement through your community, you've got to have all groups of people, right? You don't want to just do Facebook or just TikTok. You want to be able to reach as many people as possible. And that can include too the people who don't use social media, right? So keep that in mind also. Different platforms, and be consistent about it, right? You're going to want to post consistently. If your timeline is maybe a year, because that's how long you have to impact the comp plan rewrite, then, be consistent. Once you get set up, you're posting 2 or 3 times a week. And it's a consistent message. Hey, we want to impact the comp plan update by this. We want smaller lot sizes, or, whatever it is that your goal is. Just be consistent with your messaging. And you can usually have a couple of different people who are posting on social media for you, as long as they're saying the message is consistent. All right. Oh, I feel like hold on, sorry. We've got too many things here. Oh, there we go. So, group structure. And I think I've mentioned this. You may not need a formal structure. So sometimes just a handful of people showing up at a public meeting is enough to sway hearts and minds, right? Especially because we know that usually it's only the anti, torch and pitchfork crowd that is showing up to these things. And so sometimes, especially for smaller things, if it's just one development that you're trying to get built, a handful of people can really make a difference. The other part of this is we are super fortunate in Idaho that our elected officials are generally very accessible. People are shocked, especially from other states, when you tell them, yes, you can contact your city council member, you can contact your legislator, and they'll answer their phone, right? They'll respond to you, because we have that Idaho community where people are accessible, and it's really it's super important. I think it's super special because it's not necessarily the case in other communities. So decide if you need like a fully incorporated structure or not. Sometimes that's, yes, we need an EIN, we need a formal nonprofit standing because we want to accept donations, right? If you're doing a whole comp plan update, or you want to impact that, then you might need yard signs, you might need t-shirts. That's going to be a bigger budget, and you might want to consider being able to accept donations for that. And so think through, like, what do I need legally to be able to impact change? Leadership and meeting, you've still got that group of people who are your leaders, right? That's your core group of people. Assign them different roles, right? You're going to want somebody who is the facilitator, somebody who sets an agenda, somebody who's managing that list. You've got that beautiful list of contacts and organizations and individuals who care about housing. Make sure that you've got somebody who's managing that, somebody who's a whiz with spreadsheets. And then meet consistently. Once a month is usually sufficient, but figure out what works for you. Um, Member roles. So within your different, your group, right? You're going to have kind of three buckets of people that support housing. So for your pro housing group, you've got your leaders, right? These are the folks who are setting the goals. They're running the ship, right? They are deciding what direction everybody's taking. Programming might be like a training on how to talk to elected officials, or a postcard writing campaign, that kind of thing. The leaders are the ones who are actually putting those things together. They attend regular meetings to make sure that everything is flowing and moving forward. Fiscal oversight, fundraising, they might be the one that their name's on the bank account. If you've got to buy 500 yard signs, they're the ones who have to sign the check. And then with that core group of people, that your leadership group, are constantly recruiting, right? They're the ones that are bugging other people in the grocery store line saying, hey, have you heard about this? And constantly recruiting for the cause. Member advocates. These are kind of the middle tier group, because they're still super active, but they're not necessarily the ones that are deciding on direction, right? They might show up at a public meeting and testify. They might write that op-ed or something like that. They're doing a lot of the things, but not necessarily, signing the checks for the yard signs. They've definitely got a yard sign in their yard, but they're not the ones who are deciding what goes on it. And then the followers, these are the folks who believe in your cause. They support more housing. They have their own individual story. They receive your newsletter because you are so awesome and you send out a monthly or biweekly newsletter, however it is. And they support your cause. They might attend sometimes. They might support written comment or submit written comment or support in whatever way fits best for them. They're not front and center, but they're definitely involved. Okay, so we're going to pause again and just take some time. I'm going to read through the chat, but here are some questions to get you all started. And then if you've got other thoughts, definitely, unmute or put it into the chat. But we're going to take some time to just stop and think. Let's see. Small group meeting downtown. CW Moore. Yep. First, third, Angie's talking about Thursday morning. Yep, that's helpful. Jessica can help folks talk through giving public testimony. Yeah, that's a great idea. Public speaking can be really scary for people sometimes. And so providing those trainings, especially to your specific housing group, is super helpful. Like, these are the words that you can use to be effective. Yep. Taught a class. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jessica, for teaching that. People seem to feel stronger anti-housing than they do pro-housing. Yes, that is very true too, Brian. People approve of housing, but they have better things to do than testify. And that is the crux of the problem, right? What we hear from, especially local elected officials, is that they don't necessarily want to support a project, but the only people who show up are the anti voice. And I can say too, elected officials absolutely want to hear the positive. They want to hear the supporters. They want to hear somebody say, yes, this is a great idea. Please do it. And they also are generally aware of the fact that only the anti voice comes out. And that's true of any issue, right? That is true across the board, with that folks who are against something are going to be louder. Yeah, we do. And yeah, Garrett mentioned the polling. Jam State's hosting monthly lunch and learn. Yep, we're going to do all kinds of different topics recently. Ooh, that one, I'll have to catch up with that one. Can you share an example of an organized group that I've been part of, how it started, how it was led, how it connected and empowered people to take action? Yes. So 3 years ago, and I hate to talk about the great state of Ada, but I am a proud Boisean. Uh, Several years ago, Boise was rewriting its comprehensive code, right? This was a big undertaking. It was a 2 years long process. And I started out in that followers group, right? Where I was getting newsletters. I was interested. I kept seeing yard signs for legalizing more housing and got involved that way, right? And then started showing up to public meetings um, to think about, what kind of housing I wanted in my neighborhood in Boise, and really thought about it and had my own, housing stories of how expensive it is to live in the city, and started showing up to meetings and started getting involved. And how that one ultimately ended up, I know we've got some folks from Boise here, but Boise did update its comp plan and really changed things around a lot and started to allow for housing that is ultimately less expensive, right? So instead of just allowing the giant mansions in Boise, now you can build an ADU, on any residential lot. And so I've seen a few examples of those things happen in real time now too. I've got I have neighbors who built an ADU and now they've got their college age kid living there, right? So it is more housing, it's incremental, and it has been helpful. How do we promote more housing that is priced to the range of the community? Average house price in Shoshone is 270, but average income's under 55 a year. Yeah, that's somewhat of a different question, Valerie, but more supply definitely helps, right? Supply and demand. If we have more supply, then that should level off the price of housing. Um, okay, let's move on to taking action. This is kind of the exciting part, right? How do you act on some of this? Nope, nope. There we go. Preparing to mobilize, right? You've got your group, so you've done your research, you know what policies you want to change, you've got a core group of people, you've got your allies all mapped out, you have structure that fits for you, you're active on social media, you have a network built up, you've got your pro housing group. How do you do the thing, right? How do you act? First of all, choose your tactics, right? There's a variety of ways to impact policy change, and different people are going to be strong in different tactics, right? So, somebody mentioned public testimony can be really scary. It doesn't all have to be public testimony. Not everyone has to show up at the city council meeting on Tuesday. Um, but that can be one of your tactics, right? And maybe another one is postcards or email campaigns. Those kinds of things are helpful too. Um, Comment cards are particularly helpful for folks who maybe are too busy to show up on a Tuesday night, but also maybe they have mobility issues and getting into city hall is a lot, or leaving the house is a lot. Ask them to submit a comment card or an email. Sometimes that's a lot more accessible to folks, and it gives elected officials a more diverse um, set of input, right, of different engagement. Um, comment cards, meetings with policymakers, right? That is going to be where some folks shine, right? Some people are really, really good in a one-on-one meeting and can have that conversation with planning and zoning or with city council members or with the mayor and share their stories and share their perspectives or their research on what's happening in the community. That same person might be terrible at public speaking, but like really, really good at one-on-one. So utilizing different tactics, figuring out where your strengths are, um, and where you can use different people to really kind of hit this issue from all sides. Petitions, letters, all of those things. Above all, though, keep it positive, right? The negative voices are super loud, as we've already talked about, but it doesn't, like I said, the honey is a sweeter cell than the vinegar. So elected officials are constantly hearing all of this negative talk. They're under attack from people who are angry about change or angry about how Idaho is growing. If you can be positive and say, hey, I really support this project, or we really want to see the comprehensive plan updated because then it will look like this and we can have more housing and that the future is bright and we can do more. Those types of things are generally a lot more effective than like the torch and pitchfork crowd, right? Keeping it positive is absolutely a better approach, especially in like a one-on-one meeting or if you're sending an email, that kind of thing. Um, Preparing your base, right? Do you remember we had those three sections of people, those three buckets of people? So your leadership group, they're the ones who are deploying things and saying, okay, we're going to do comment cards here and we're going to do public hearing or public testimony and we're going to do email campaign. Those group in the middle, cool, you got them lined up to testify. These are your talking points. This is what you're going to say. Here's some statistics for you. Training folks, those in the group of that third group, that follower group, make sure that they might have an email template to use, and you say, hey, you can reach out to your public official. This is how you do it. Here's some points to hit on. Um, take action and customize it to your own voice or share your own story. This is how you do it, right? Here's contact information. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Here's your contact information. So preparing to mobilize, getting folks ready to do the thing. All right. And then you get to do it. Mobilize, recruiting people to show up, sending reminders, making sure everybody knows that that meeting is at 6 p.m. on Tuesday. Show up, wear your cool t-shirt that matches with everybody else, but making sure that everybody's on the same page. And this includes getting your allies to show up also, right? It's not just your core group of people. It's also that group that works for, housing for veterans, or the other group that does, homelessness prevention, that kind of thing. It's making sure that everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows when the meeting is. Everybody shows up. Document, yeah, take pictures. Make sure that, after the fact, you can show to your community that people did show up in support of new housing, right? People want this, and that it's louder than just the NIMBY crowd, right? It also gives a certain amount of cover, right? If you've got, say, the local media does a story on this and they say, hey, this wasn't just the normal crowd, like 10 people showed up to testify in support of this, housing development, right? It gives elected officials a little bit more breathing room to say, yeah, we supported this because the people support this, right? And then the last step that's super important and that sometimes gets missed is celebrate and evaluate, right? So thank everybody who took action, right? Send them that quick email. Thank you so much. Your engagement in this matters. It makes a difference. After party events are always super fun when you get to celebrate the win and pizza and beer and all of that good stuff. And then recognizing individuals also, right? If you've got that city council member who supported this, send them a thank you, right? Send them a note that says, hey, thank you. This is super helpful. Make sure that they know that their vote, their support is appreciated. All right. And the last minute to think. And so I'm gonna think through, jot down some things and I'll look through the chat about the things are helpful. Yeah, that's a great thought, Jessica. Representative Cheatham, it's very important to understand changes in comp plans or in P&Z. It's very, very slow. Yes, that is very, very true. Public policy, by design, does not change quickly, right? We want it to be slow and thoughtful and deliberate, and it takes time. It's meant to be a slow process. And for the public officials, it's super important to get lots of comments, right? So that's where these groups can make an impact, is because, especially for something big like a comprehensive plan update, the city is going to try to do public engagement, right? Because they're required to hold open meetings. Your job as a pro housing group is to get the right voices engaged, right? Is to try and help shape that narrative, because it is a really slow process. Something big like a comp plan update, you can take time to try and cultivate the right voices to show up, and that will be hopefully a diverse set of voices from across the city, from different incomes, from different neighborhoods, from different backgrounds. You want all of these folks to be able to tell their housing story in a way that helps affect change. Transportation, Denise adds that transportation is also part of housing. Absolutely, especially for folks who maybe have mobility issues, right? Our seniors, a lot of times our seniors lose the ability to drive, and being close to a bus station is super important. Or for our workforce, that's super helpful too, right? If you can get on a bus and it takes you to the factory, or it takes you to the manufacturer, or it takes you to the farm, whatever it is, that's super helpful. Transportation is definitely part of it. Are there restrictions on mixed use development? There should be more of that. Agreed, Cody. There should absolutely be more of that. That depends on your particular city, right? And some cities allow this and some don't. That can be what's complicated about zoning and planning, right? Is every city's a little bit different, and every city allows something a little bit different. Um, so that goes back to the research phase, right? You kind of have to look and you kind of have to dig. And usually city departments and city planners are super helpful in this. You could say, hey, what's the rules on mixed use development in our city? And they'll usually get back to you and say, yeah, you can do this, or you can't do that, or it's only allowed in a certain zone, that kind of thing. So, Model project in Boise's North End. Yes, great, Aaron. Good story. To something to add to the list of things to support. Recent legislation requires local governments to update zoning codes and comp plans to address statutory changes. Yes, Nancy, in cities of over 10,000, right? So some of our smaller communities are not going to be affected by the legislation that passed this year. How can advocates for affordable or accessible housing broaden those conversations to formalize additional solutions during that process? I love your thinking. Yes. So cities right now are required to, cities of over 10,000 are required to allow ADUs now, and small lot subdivisions. So if you in your city of over 10,000 people want to expand that, then yeah, start a pro housing group. Cities have a deadline of February 1st to be able to implement those changes, implement the new laws. And you can form a pro housing group that says, hey, this is great. Why don't we take it further? Right? Submit public comments, start this whole process to say, hey, this was a good start. What else can we do? Right? Starting those conversations. And that can be part of the goal, is expanding what the state is doing to your local community. Or if you're in a city of less than 10,000, your pro housing group could say, hey, the state made this change and it's a mandate for a bigger city, but we're small, but we also want to do that here, right? We want to allow ADUs in our city. And how can we do that, right? Maybe that's the goal for your pro housing group. So good question, good points all around. All right. So, questions and next steps. If you need more resources, there were some really specific things in the chat, which I love. Feel free to email us, go on to gemstatehousing.org. We have a lot of resources. And if you don't see the resource that you're looking for, send an email to us through the contact form and we can find stuff for you, right? If you want to set up a pro housing group and you're like, oh, this is super helpful, but like I need more, I want more information, reach out to me and we can have a conversation about this, right? Um, because it can be a big process. So there are a lot of resources that we can give to you. I can do one-on-one meetings too. Our goal with Gem State is part of our goals are to get these little groups stood up all over the state, right? So that we can affect policy change all over the state and that the public has buy-in, right? That the public is engaged in this, they are aware of what's going on, and they're the ones who are calling for these changes, right? It shouldn't be Gem State that says, hey, we want to do all of this. It should be all of you and your awesome pro housing groups. Also, if you sign up for our newsletter, you get updates on what's happening within probably the next few weeks. I have a brand new tool that I'm super excited that tracks planning and zoning and tracks city council meetings where there are developments. It's really neat. And so I'm super excited to get it up and running. I'm still just kind of playing with it. And so within the next month or so, that should be a thing where through our newsletter or through our website, you'll get an alert if there's, a project that is up and we need public comment to go and support it. So that is super cool. Super excited about that. And then other, things, become a member. So Gem State, we are 6 months old, I think now, barely. We're just a brand new organization. And our work is supported by, people and organizations from Idaho, and it really helps move our work forward. If you're a member, if you can support us, show up at our events, and then also, engage, like ask us questions. If you're interested in this, like I said, I'm building this inventory of groups from around the state and would love to have your name on there and get you involved. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and yay, right on time. It is 10 till. So what other questions do folks have? Feel free to unmute or drop in the chat. I feel like I've been just yammering away for 50 minutes. Gotta hop. Thanks, everybody. Yay. This was so wonderful.